Please introduce yourself.
So I'm Sobaagh Zoutenberg. I'm a third-year gender student. I'm majoring in literature and gender, and my pronouns are they, them.
Nice. What is the significance of June 16th?
So my take on it is that June 16th, I think 1976, was the Soweto Uprising. And basically what happened on that day was there was a peaceful protest with secondary high school students. They took to the streets. There was banners, posters and whatever, but basically they were protesting, I would say, the institutional, systematic sort of violence, oppression of people of color. But what the basis is more just the Bantu education system and how it sort of trained people of color specifically to become laborers, but also remain in the sort of racist hierarchy that kept white people sort of on top. But the apartheid reaction to that was police brutality, violence, shooting. But I think it's sort of there was a lot of things that led up to it. And one of the factors was that around that time was the Black Consciousness Movement by Steve Biko.
Yeah.
And they were sort of leading people, they were introducing people to this idea of psychological liberation, that they don't need to sort of be living this way. And I think that was one of the factors, besides just the long-term violence that sort of led to this uprising, which was a single moment in a very big map. Yeah.
Okay.
So I think that's mostly the significance, but it's also significant because I know there was a lot of international backlash, specifically after this. Yeah, so it's quite a pivotal moment.
Okay. And what are the current issues being faced by the youth?
In relation to Youth Day, which is what we call it now.
Or just generally even.
Generally.
Or South African youth specifically, but more broadly if you want.
I will focus on South African, but Western Cape, just because that's sort of where I live. Yeah. So I can only really speak from my own space. What I've been thinking a lot about recently, besides sort of what came up when I was thinking about this, was there's still a lot of spatial segregation, and that has a lot of effects on just daily life, but also things like access to transport, what are they called? Primary needs, basic needs. Yeah, safety, food, sort of what's happening in your area. Because I've been thinking about it a lot, just because, I'm a UCT student, so I'm on jammies a lot. And I have to take public transport to get to the jammy. And then the taxi I'm on, there's a lot of shooting down the road, and there's a lot of robbery along the same road. And I just keep comparing it to some people that I know who just hop in their cars and sort of drive to university. And it's just, even if you come from the same economic bracket, your racial identity, even though people are sort of okay, race is sort of it's a cultural, it's a thing, we need to leave it behind, it's still quite big just because of the way that Western Cape is still featured. Yeah, so also I know my mom teaches in, if I'm thinking about the youth, I'm thinking sort of from growing from child, entering sort of primary school and then high school and whatever. There's a lot of sort of government schools now, but a lot of them are underfunded, and there's a lack of resources, there's a lack of teachers, there's a lack of funding for teachers, and the changing system. But I think a lot of people don't think about, or maybe I think they don't think about, is even though there's schools, you're not thinking about the systematic oppression around the schools, because then the kids are coming in and their parents are on drugs, and the grandma is looking after them with sasa money, and it's sort of that's not equal to another kid who's sort of just coming to primary school, and it's clean, and some people are just going to school for food, and that sort of builds up to primary school, where there's differences in the way people live. So yeah, that's what I've been thinking about.
Okay.
And then there's just general things like there's a lot of transphobia, there's a
Yeah.
lot of homophobia, there's a lot of just globalization problems, like the rising cost of living. It's a bit yeah, I'm kind of hoping something happens. Can't really afford anything. Yeah.
And do you think the current youth are living up to the legacy of the June 16 youth? Do you think we have to, or should have to?
The first thought I had about that was, what do I consider the legacy? And I went through like various thoughts. Like my first ones were revolution. Should we be fighting for like immediate change? Is this like, what exactly would you call the revolution? But my ultimate answer was, I don't think we're living up to what I would consider the revolution, because it was like a big movement change. And I mentioned like the build up to it was all of like this ideological, but also just like the drive for change.
Yeah.
And what I have been seeing a lot, like when I'm talking to people, especially with the elections that were happening, there's this sort of like despondency and a lack of hope for the country, which is understandable. But so I think that I think we're on two very different sides, where especially since June 16th was leading to, we need change, we need like complete liberation from this entire thing. Now that there is like democracy, sorry about the like, but like the systems are still there despite the laws. And I feel like what I'm getting to is, I've been speaking to a lot of people who didn't vote, but they weren't like casually forgetting. They were saying, we don't believe the government can do anything, and they don't want to give their support to something that they feel like is just going to bite them back. But I have been seeing that the youth is a lot more hopeful.
Okay.
But in a more anarchist way, where my friends have been like, we voted, but we voted for anything but like the bigger parties, just because we want something to flip it out. Just, I think, speaks about the parties that we have right now. Yeah. What was the question? Oh, yeah, we were talking about the legacy. So I think I'm still not sure what the legacy is. And on top of that, if it's a legacy of revolution and change and hope for the future, I think there's a very long way to go. Like there's like a tiny bit of hope, but I think we have like a long way to go, just like getting people to realize they're people at the moment. I think there's still like a big lack of realizing what humanity is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Thank you so much.